Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Hypnospace Outlaw. It's a fantastic nostalgia trip for those of us who grew up on the internet in the 90s/early 2000s, and an overall just really fun and unique experience. It's one of the few games that I've 100%ed, and I'm also eagerly awaiting the sequel. So it only makes sense that in the meantime we'd recreate something from Hypnospace Outlaw. Cue today's project where we're recreating one of the mini games, Janitor. But before we get into this remake, remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes, and with that said, let's remake Janitor. But first, let me explain what Janitor is. Janitor is a minigame in Hypnospace Outlaw that allows the player to earn in-game currency. The game itself is pretty simple. Grab files that appear on the desktop and stack them in a pile. When the pile reaches its limit, incinerate for experience. Level up and earn those sweet in-game coins. Now there's a bit more to it, but we'll get to those details later. Now overall it's weird and it's not even the best way to earn in the game, but it's always had a special place in my heart, and thus I've always wanted to remake it. So here we've got some enums for later and a list of variables and macros to help shape our little remake. And yes, we've even got some particles. One for the coin celebration and the other a smoke effect for incineration. Now on to the good stuff, the functions. First, our files are pulled to make things a little more optimized since we'll be seeing them in abundance anyway. Next, to give context to the other functions, let's move on to the heart of our remake, the ticker. Starting with our spawner for files, a new file is created every X amount of frames. The higher the player's level, the shorter the time between spawns. Next, we move on to the cursor behavior, which you may notice works similarly to the cursor from our jigsaw puzzle revisit from last month. The cursor object moves with the mouse and is mostly used for collision purposes. When the player left clicks, generally speaking, if they haven't picked anything up, be it a file, trash, or the incinerator itself, that object is recorded to our grab data. Again, much like the jigsaw revisit, when something is grabbed, it records a list of reference data to an array before deactivating the object itself. This data is used for multiple things such as display and collision conditionals. For example, the incinerator. If the player is holding a file, this file is then removed from the play area, smoke particles are spawned, and grab data is reset. If the player is holding a pile of trash, then a few extra checks are made. First, if the trash is full, it is incinerated. This creates some coin particles and awards the player a point. If the player's earned enough points, their level is increased, the points goal and trash pile goals are increased, the spawn rate of the files is increased, and the point score is reset. The trash object is then reactivated, its data contents removed, and then destroyed. Speaking of which, let's talk about those trash piles. Now, trash piles are created when two files are stacked. They are both removed, and in their place, a trash pile object is created. However, once in a while, the game will spawn special bad files marked with a skull. Now, these files have to be incinerated. If they are added to a trash pile, that pile is destroyed, and all the files stacked in said pile are thrown back into the play area. So if the player is holding a file, that file is then added to the existing trash pile using a function. In this function, we check if the trash limit has been reached or if the file being trashed is one of those bad files. If neither conditions are met, the ID of that file is recorded to the trash pile and deactivated. If even one of those conditions are met, however, a trash pop function is triggered. This pop function takes that list of files stored in that trash pile's array and reactivates them all, reintroducing them to the world before destroying itself. So yes, technically our version is slightly more evil than the original, as overstuffing the trash will also cause the pile to explode like adding a bad file would. And with that, let's look at the file collision code. If the player is holding a file, this creates a trash pile just as described. Both files are recorded to that trash pile and deactivated, assuming one isn't a bad file. Bad files are simply swapped in the grab event. And finally, there is a general place function, which does exactly as it suggests. It reactivates a grabbed object and updates its position to match where it would appear as if it were active all along. Now, another thing to note about bad files in Janitor is that if left alone for too long, they will trigger, resetting the player's progress to square one. So in our file object, if the file is bad, a timer runs, and once it reaches its limit, the file destroys all bad files in play and resets the player's progress. And if you're curious how we use the rest of that grab data, it's mostly used for the draw code to display files, trash, or whatever is currently grabbed. There's also a text message that displays for like half a second when the player levels up or has their progress reset. And that was the remake. It's a pretty faithful recreation outside of a few tweaks to the timing and the change to the trash stacking. Although full transparency, I went about coding this thing in a very convoluted way. This was mostly due to the fact that this was yet another Let's Dev project and it was set up months ago. And admittedly in that time I kind of forgot how I'd planned to build the project. Things would have been much more simple had events been broken down into like mouse press and release events. But as it stands, everything was coded into a single left click press event, and thus a lot of extra footwork was done to compensate for such a general check. Still, this was fun and also a great way to exercise the brain. So what did you think of this remake? Have you played Hypnospace Outlaw? Leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed the video and want to support the creation of more content like it, consider subscribing to my Patreon. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.